Okay, welcome everyone to Google Forms Intermediate Training. We are going to pick up where Sarah left off last week, going over some of how to set up a Google form, things she didn't quite get to cover, and then I'm also going to be talking about response destination, and if we have time at the very end, go dig more into creating a quiz using a Google form. And like I said, if we don't get to that, we'll talk about that for sure next week when we cover classroom applications for Google Forms. So starting off the bat, we have our Google form, and you'll notice that I do have a couple questions already in there, but we are going to review some of the question types that weren't covered last week. So if you remember from last week, when you are in a Google form, you have a toolbar along here up at the top where you have a little puzzle piece, paint palette, eye, and gear. And then we also have our toolbar along the side, which is where you're going to be mainly using to build your survey. So when I'm in my survey, I have the ability to add a question. It's going to add a question wherever you are currently selected. So I'm selected on this "What is your favorite food?" question. So when I click the Add a Question button, it's going to put it below that. If for some reason I don't want that question there, remember you can always hover over the top and click and drag and move it to a different spot. So when I have this question, you can start typing your question here. Your options are below. And then this is where you're going to change your question type. So talked about the top couple ones already, but I'm going to show you some additional ones that you can use. This first one is a file upload. So when I click on that, what you will do is this allows your participants to upload something for you to then view. So when I hit continue, you'll notice that this is where I can type in my question, and I am allowed to adjust what they can upload. So maybe I want them to submit a picture of their work. Okay, especially if we're distance learning, maybe you want them to take a picture of their math problems that are written down in a notebook. You can have them submit a picture. I can toggle on to allow only specific file types. If I want only a picture, I can toggle that on and then pick what type it would be. I would select image file in this case. You could also get a very specific, if you want them to submit an essay that they wrote or, something along those lines. If it's toggled off, all that means is they can attach any type of file. You also have the ability to change how many files you would like them to add. So maybe you want them to add multiple files to this one question. You can adjust that. They allow you to say 1 or up to 5, right? So it doesn't mean a student has to upload 5 of them, but that would be the maximum that they could do. And then you also have the option for 10. You also have a maximum file size, which you can adjust and change. The default is set to 10 megabytes. When you have this file upload question, what happens is Google Forms then creates a folder in your drive, and any document that is submitted will go into that folder. It's also, when you're on your responses tab, there will be a link there. So even though it drops everything into one folder in your drive, you can also look at specific documents by clicking a link, and then it will open it for you as well. So that's the file upload question type. We also have some below. We have a linear scale. This would allow people, your participants, to, on a scale of 1 to 5, how comfortable do you feel? Or, 1 to 10, you can adjust it to up to 10 if you would like. And then it gives you the options. So, if you strongly disagree, you could put that as 1, and then strongly agree at 5, or not comfortable, very comfortable. You get to determine those labels. Also available is the multiple choice grid and checkbox grid. So these are very similar. The difference is, and if you remember from last week, multiple choice means they can only select one answer in each based on the question. So for the multiple choice grid, they would only be able to select one in each column or row. And then the checkbox grid allows them to select multiple. So if you, for some reason, had a question and you want them to select all that applies for multiple things, you would choose the checkbox grid. When you are on this grid, you'll notice that it gives you rows and columns. That's not how it's going to look for your participants, but that is how they ask you to enter in the information. So if I have a question, how do you feel about? And then I might say, you know, indoor recess, or gym, reading, so forth, math. And then my columns would be their choices. So maybe good, okay, not good. Now again, this is not the view that your participants will see. If you remember from last week, you can always hit this eyeball icon in the top right corner to preview your quiz. So I'll just show you what that would look like. And you'll notice that it does put it into a grid format so that participants can select. Again, because this is a multiple choice one, you'll notice I cannot select multiple ones for indoor recess. If I were to change that to checkboxes, then they would be able to select as many as they would like. And those, and I believe all the other ones were talked about last week, so those are just some of the more advanced features that you have in a Google form. I also want to show you that in addition to adding single questions, you can use this icon, which is importing questions, and you can import it from another Google form. So when I click on this icon, what it's going to do is it's going to access my Google Drive, and it's going to show me all of the forms that I have already created. So maybe I want to pull a question from this form. I'll select the form I would like. You could also search for it if you have a lot of them. When I hit select, along the right-hand side, a window pops up, and it allows you to either select all of the questions and import them, or I can pick and choose. So maybe I only want this question, and maybe I also want, maybe I want these three. So I can select that. If I'm like, oh, this wasn't the form that I wanted, I can always change the form and import from a different one. So when I hit the import questions, you'll notice it puts it directly below whatever question I was selected. So I had this one selected. Again, you can click and drag and move, but now I have those three questions that were in my other form automatically put in. And you'll notice that in addition to the questions being imported, the settings also were imported. So this one was a required question on my previous form. It is still required. These were not required questions, so that was not toggled on when I brought them in, although you can always adjust that if needed. In addition to adding questions to your Google form, you do have the ability to add titles and descriptions. So you're all automatically given this title box, right? So it gives you the title of your form, and it allows you to type in a description at the very top. But maybe you want to do a form that has multiple sections, but on the same screen. And I'll show you how to do multiple sections, which would be on different views right after this. But let's say I have my top title. After they answer their name and how many days they're available to meet, I want to have another section. So what I can do is I can click on the question, and this is the title and description. It's the big T and little t. And when I click on that, you'll notice again directly below, it adds a new title and description. So this would allow me to break it up, or maybe I have more that I want to say, right? So these questions were very straightforward questions. But for this one, I want to make sure that they understand they can only pick one. It's whatever is the best fit. So I might say, your feelings, and then type in a description. please select the best choice. And then that is now a heading that is above the rest of my questions. And again, when I show you what that looks like, right, you'll notice we have our big heading up here with our description, but now there's an additional one below so that it breaks it up a little bit more. If you, for whatever reason, don't want to have this heading, again, there's always that delete button. There is also the 3 dots that give you additional options. In this case, I can get rid of that description. So if I only want to have the title, I can uncheck that, and then the description then goes away. Now, in some situations, you might have a question that requires explaining a little bit more, but you don't necessarily want to have a new heading. And what you can do is when you're on the question, so again, this example, how do you feel about? When you click on those 3 dots in the bottom right-hand corner on this question, there is where you have the ability to add a description specifically for this question. So what's going to happen is when I check that, you'll notice the question is above, and then maybe I want to have some more specific guidance for this question, and I can just type it here. So please select only one. That way my students or staff know that if they try to select multiple ones, it's not going to record it. And I have a description just for this question. Also in the 3 dots for each question, you'll notice that here is that limit 1 response per column. That automatically is checked for, or it should automatically happen for this multiple choice grid. But if you wanted to adjust that for the checkbox, you could. And then there's also this shuffle row order. If you're doing some type of quiz with students, maybe you want these to be in a different order for each participant. You can also adjust that. It won't show up on yours, but when participants go in to take it, then it would shuffle the order of the rows, not the columns. Okay. In addition to adding questions, remember that you can always embed pictures and videos. And I know Sarah talked about that a little bit last week, but I'm just going to show you real quickly again. So we talked about this title and description. Here's where you're able to insert an image. Again, it brings up, you can browse, Google image search. When you do that, you'll notice that it just places the image in, not with a question. So in Sarah's example, right, she showed, a map. You could title that image and then have questions below, which would help, for your visual learners. Same thing with the video, right? So if I go to insert a video, you are able to search by URL or just on YouTube. Again, if you're using YouTube with students, please make sure that you go to YouTube, preview the entire video first to make sure it's appropriate, and then approve it, because if it is not approved, your students would get an error message and not be able to watch. And then again, this is just importing something that the students can watch, and then you would have questions below. Now, in some situations, you might want to have a picture as your response, and you can definitely do that. So below you'll notice I have what is your favorite food. This might be great for younger learners if you want to do a survey with them. So this is just a multiple choice question, but then when I am typing in my options, so pasta, pizza, maybe we'll do salad, you'll notice that on the right-hand side, next to the remove button, there is this add an image. When I click on that, again, it gives me all of the same options. I'm just going to do a quick Google search, and then I can pick whichever one I would like, and then insert it. When I go to preview my form, you'll notice that it has the picture with the choices below. So that is an additional option that you have when you're doing a question. Okay, I'm going to pause there and see if there are any questions before we move on to multiple sections in a survey.
There was just a question that came in on audio clips, and is there an ability to insert audio?
Right, so unfortunately, there isn't a way to insert audio. So there's a couple things that I've seen other people do. So one example would be, and we'll talk about this next week, was if you wanted to give a spelling test virtually, right? People will record a video of themselves saying the words and then import it that way. You could also record a video file but not show your face, right? You could have something there instead, but it does have to be a video file when you are adding it to a Google form. Great question. Okay, the next thing that we're going to talk about is multiple sections, and this is really great if you have a long survey or you want students to stay focused on something at hand before moving on to another one. And that's this last option, which is the Add a Section button. So again, when I click on it, it will put it below whatever question I currently have selected. Although I can always move that. So when I hit the Add a Section button, you'll notice that I am given a section, another large title and description. And, you know, maybe this is going to be your favorites. And what I can then do is add questions below. So I'm going to just click and drag this question below because that's a favorite one. And then when I go to preview, these questions will be on the first screen, and then this one will be a new section. So I'll show you real quickly. Again, here are my top questions. Instead of saying submit at the bottom, there's a next button. So I can click on next. And then it brings me to my next section. Breaks it up nicely. And there is definitely a benefit to having sections. And I'm gonna show you one in just a second. But when you add sections, you will notice that you do get another option. So below your sections that you have, you can decide how you would like your participants to move on. So for example, if I have what is my favorite food, maybe then I want to have a pizza section, right? So I'm going to have pizza, whoops. I'm going to have a pasta section, and then I would also have a salad section. And maybe once they select pizza, I want them to then write about why they like pizza. And then I might also want them to watch a video about pizza, like how to make pizza. Okay, so these are things I only want the people to see if they selected pizza. And then I would do the same thing for pasta and the same thing for salads. So once they answer this question, you'll notice that, again, I can have them continue on to the next section, or I can have them go to a section based on a certain answer. So to do that, when I click on this question, again, we have those 3 dots in the bottom corner. And again, you'll notice now I have go to section based on answer. When I click on that, more options pop up. So if they select pizza, I don't want them to continue on to the next section. I want them to actually go to section 3, pizza. If they select pasta, I want them to go to pasta. And then if I had a salad one, which I'll add real quickly, if they select salad, then I want them to go to the salad section. Okay. The other thing to note is, so I have the pizza going to the pizza section. Well, after they watch the video and answer the question, I don't necessarily want them to go to the next section because that's pasta, right? I would have them submit the form, and you can change that. So after each section, after the salad section, I'm going to have them also submit the form, and then the pasta section's the last one, so it will automatically ask them to submit. But this is great for differentiation. So I'll show you what this looks like in preview mode. Again, this would be one that I would require an answer because it is going to based on a certain section. But when I'm in preview mode, right, so I have my questions. This one was required. Oh, not that one. This one was required. Not that it matters. I go to next. Now I have what are your favorites. If I select pizza and I hit next, because again I have another section, it will bring me to my pizza section, and then I can watch it, I can write an answer, and I can submit. If I were to select pasta instead, when I hit next, it takes me to that pasta section, which again, there's nothing in right now. Okay, I'm gonna pause again. Are there any questions or comments about adding sections? And then also going to a specific section based on answer. Okay. Another thing to note is you do have the ability to have response validation. So when you have a question that you really, maybe you want them to type something in, but you want it to be a number or something along those lines, you can have response validation. So this question, how many days during the week are you available to meet? If I select that, so it's obviously a short answer. I want you to type it in, but I want to make sure that they type in a number for me so that when I'm doing my data pull later, it's all the same format instead of having some people typed in a physical number and others typing in the word for the number, right? So what you can do is using those, again, 3 dots at the bottom, you can turn on response validation. And when I turn that on, it gives me some options. So I want a number, and I want that number to be between, maybe 1 and 7. I don't want them to type in 14 because that wouldn't apply to this question. You can also then type in a custom error message. So if they don't type in a number between 1 and 7, or they type in a word instead, this is the error message they'd receive. Okay. So then again, when I am in preview mode, and you'll notice that if I start typing in 2, as soon as I click off that, I get that error message that I typed in. Okay, and it will not let them move on until they fix that. So once I type in 2, I no longer get that error message. So that's response validation. Again, it's available on most questions, not obviously all of them, but your short answer, definitely it's available on. In addition to typing in questions, adding questions, we're now going to move on to how you can view your responses. So I just want to, again, pause real quickly. We only have about 6 minutes left, but are there any questions on adding questions and creating the form itself?
There wasn't any questions, but someone had asked about reviewing where to put responses, which you are going to cover in a second. And there was another one that just popped up on how to share a Google form on Seesaw.
Okay, perfect. I'll talk about responses first, and then we can talk about how you can push something like this out in our settings when we just quickly go over settings. So when you are editing your Google form, you'll notice we've been on this questions tab. This is how you are making that. You then also have a responses tab. So when I click on the responses tab, here's where any thing that is submitted would then be entered. And I'll show you real quickly what that looks like. I'll just real quickly do some of these. And we'll say pasta, so I don't have to do anything else. And then I submit that. So once the form is submitted, when I go in, you'll notice now I have a response. When I click on the response, it shows you a summary. This summary is based on the entire survey. So you'll notice I have one response for name, another response here. Google uses some great AI, and it creates graphics for you if possible. So, it decided there's a chart here. I have a pie chart as well. And then it also shows you the different sections. You can also view it by question. So maybe I only want to look at the name question. I can see all the responses there, or I can toggle between any question that I have. And then you can also see individual survey questions. So there's one survey response. I can see what this one person did and answered completely. And if I had multiple ones, I'd be able to toggle between or type in and look at different ones as well. So this is a great view for real basic general understanding of your survey. But you'll also want to know that you can create a spreadsheet. So if you are going to have a lot of survey responses and you want to be able to organize it a certain way or look at the big picture, what you're going to do is you're going to click this Create Spreadsheet. Chances are you're going to create a new spreadsheet for that. You can select existing spreadsheets if for some reason you wanted it to be linked to a spreadsheet you already have. But when you click on Create a New Spreadsheet, it will automatically create that for you, put it in your drive, and then insert all of your questions in the first row, and then all your answers will be populated below. The great thing about this is that it's linked, so it will be continually updated as long as responses continue to come in. So currently I have one response. If I were to go back and submit another response, it would then pull it in here automatically. And you know that your survey is linked to the Google Sheet by seeing the little Forms icon at the bottom of the tab. If for some reason you do not see that purple icon, that means your spreadsheet and your Google form is no longer linked and it will not continue to update. You can manually unlink forms by clicking the down arrow, and I can unlink it. And that would be most likely the case for how it becomes unlinked. Another thing when we're on this responses tab that's important is, I get a lot of teachers saying like, well, I sent out a form and then I forgot to go back and check. Like I sent it out to my parents to get feedback and then I totally forgot to check things. So on this responses tab, again, you have these three dots and you have the ability to turn on email notifications when someone submits the form. So every time a response would come in, you would get an email notification that a new response was entered, and then you could go in and check it out. Here's also another way to unlink the form if you wanted to, and then you can delete all of the responses if you wanted to use the same form, next school year. You could clear out all of them, and that would be if you wanted to keep using the exact same form. Remember, there is always that import questions as well.
There was a real quick question on, can you separate out by class period responses? And for those of you who were in my session yesterday, and I talked a little bit about that query formula, you would want to add a question in the form saying, what hour you are in this class, and then you could do some formula work to separate out the responses by class period in the spreadsheet.
Awesome. Yeah, great question. Forms and spreadsheets work so well in tandem. And you can pretty much make everything work. Like Jenny said, she's the guru when it comes to formulas and things like that. But you do have to make sure that your form is set up correctly so that you can sort that information. Okay, we are at 10:30, but I am going to show you real quickly how to send this one more time because this is incredibly important. When you are ready to send out your form, you don't want to just copy this URL. This what you'll notice says edit. If you were to copy this and send this out, you could have people changing the form on you. So when you are ready to send, it's incredibly important that you hit the send button at the top. And that brings you to another kind of settings icon. You have the ability to collect email addresses if you would like. You can toggle that on or not. You can send the form via email. So if you wanted to, you could search if you're only sending it to a couple people or maybe an email list, right? If I wanted to send it to the ELC, I could select ELC and it would send it to those staff members. You also have the ability to send a link. This is probably the most common way. So when I go to link, what I can do is I can just copy that link. Here's how you could push it out to Seesaw, right? So if you copied this link and then posted it in a Seesaw announcement or put it on an activity, and Seesaw just rolled out some new things which are really awesome, and we'll be talking about that later this summer, but you could link it into an activity as well. And then there is also an embed. If you have a website, you can embed the form directly on the website using this embed code. If you're using a Google site, it's even simpler than that. Okay, so I'll hang on if you have any additional questions. Sorry we didn't get to creating a quiz, which I know I initially said would be during this session, but I will start with that next week. When we talk about classroom applications, I'll show you how to create a quiz and then make sure that your questions are answered and it grades it for you. But again, thank you for being here. And if you have any questions, just please let me know.